Any others? 5. 2. Alright, let's start with those. And then if there are any others, we'll go back through them. So starting with number 2. This gives you a point plotted on the graph. It tells you it's a direct variation. So we need to remember a couple things. 1, a direct variation is a line that goes through the origin. The constant is the same between all the points. So if it gives us 1 point already, one of our other 2 points that we plot can be the origin. And then you could do one of 2 things. Either find your constant by counting it on the graph, or taking your y over x to find it. Either way, you should get 1/2. So somewhere on here, go up 1 to the right 2, down 1 to the left 2. Maybe you want to do that 3 times and it be some point over here. Doesn't matter. You just need 2 other points on there that matches. Questions on that? Number 3, they give us ordered pairs with a value missing, and they tell us we're doing inverse. So inverse, to find our k value, we are multiplying -2 and 6. After we find our k value, then we can put that into our equation. Y equals k over x, where k is now -12. And then look at the pieces and parts we're given and missing. We know that x is 3. We don't know what y is, so put 3 in for x and find your y value. So if you got -4, that was correct. If you double check to see, does this work? 3 times -4 does give us -12, so that does indeed work. Questions on that one? And then 5. If Isaiah babysits 12 hours, he earns $72. If he babysits 18 hours, he earns $108. So think about those examples when I said they either go up or down together or they do opposites. Are these going up together or are they opposites? Does the more he work, does the more he gain? Yes. So if that's the case, this has to be a direct. And then because it is direct, then we can use the information given to work this out. So find your k value first. Y is the total amount of money. X is the hours. So you can either do 72 over 12 or 108 over 18. Doesn't matter, you should get the same thing. Divide that. Someone tell me what that would be. So this would be $6 per hour for our K. And then our equation would be Y equals 6X. They didn't ask us to find anything else because they gave us all of our values. We weren't missing one. We just had to find the equation. Other questions on that? Just like last class, I'm going to give you 2 options on things you can practice. In your inverse, and if you're writing this down, I'll put my back. In your inverse variation notes, the last couple of pages, the practice problems, you could be working on these 2, 4, 7, 8, 7, 9, and 10 in the word problems. Or if you haven't done this week's Khan Academy / last week's, you could be working on that. So either Khan Academy or this for the next however much time before lunch and then however much time after. So it's 34. So for the next 9 minutes and then 11 minutes when we come back. And talk about joint and combined variation, which is the last type of variation we need to talk about. So everyone should have these notes in front of them. You can probably guess as to what joint and combined variation might entail. Either a combination of both direct and inverse in the same problem, or something that's jointly, and we'll talk about that. But before we do that, it would be a good review to just quickly go through direct and inverse so we can compare and be able to use them correctly. So direct variation, to find the constant, we use the ratio y over x. Inverse, we use the product x times y, or y times x, does not matter. The equation form of our direct variation is y equals kx. Inverse is y equals k over x. So there are some examples here. Notice the differences. Your direct has x next to your number. Your inverse has x underneath. So try to keep those straight. To check to see are these inverse or direct, you can do either the product or the ratio for each of these. The graph of direct is a line that goes through the origin where the constant is the same. The inverse, we didn't talk about what this word is called, but it looks like that, and it's called a hyperbola. If it makes that shape, you know it's an inverse. And then
it kind of looks like an H tilted sideways.
Yeah, it does. And then to solve for missing variables for direct, use your equation to find k, y over x, and then put that in your your direct variation equation and solve. And the same thing for inverse. Solve for k, and then put that in and solve. So that's just a quick overview. That way you remember what those are, what they look like, and things like that. So we're going to use those, but try to do it without looking back, but you still have it to look back at as we go through some of these examples. So on the next page, for number 1, is this direct, inverse, or neither? It is inverse. It has the x in the denominator, so that should tell you light bulb should go off, bell should go off, that this is inverse. What about number 2? It is neither. It almost looks like it should be direct, but because of that +1, it is neither. Okay. Number 3, we would have to solve this, get y by itself. So divide both sides by 4. I'm going to leave it like this first and see if we can tell just from this, and then we'll rewrite it. Is this direct, inverse, or neither? It's not neither. It's not inverse because the x isn't down here. It is direct because we can rewrite it like this. So if you see a number underneath or being divided, remember that we can rewrite that as a fraction where x is next to it, so that is direct. Okay. Number 4, you could solve this, get y by itself, but you could also look at how do we solve for k and see if this is one of them. Is this direct, inverse, or neither? Not direct. If we were trying to find k and we were multiplying these together to get our k value, which one would that be? Inverse. Now, if you did actually solve it, so let's say I divided both sides by x to get y by itself, we would see that our x is also in our denominator. So either way, either originally or after solving it, you should be able to see that that's inverse. We're going to skip around a little bit. Going to 9. So this is kind of like the quick check problem you had. Sometimes it won't say if it's direct or inverse. You just have to see, either multiply them together or start dividing them together and see do you get the same value. So let's start multiplying just because. If we start multiplying 20 and 1.5, what will we get? 30. 12 and 2.5. Also 30. 4 and 7.5. And then also 30. Don't assume that these are all going to be the same number because one could not be the same and then it throws off the whole thing. So make sure you check it for every single thing. Since these are all 30, I can say that I multiply to get them, and that would be inverse. Okay. We'll do one more of these and then questions, and then we'll do some more. Let's do 10. Same thing. Let's try to multiply them like we did before, see if we get the same result. 31 and 217. What would that give us? 67.27. Okay. 20 times 140. Okay. So already these are not the same. Multiplying is not going to work, so it's not inverse. A good reason to also check them all is because just because it's not inverse doesn't mean it's direct either. It could be neither. Yeah, let's try and divide it. So 217 and 31. Someone said 7. 140 and 20. Also 7. 119 and 17. Also 7. And then 84 and 12. Also 7. So because 7 was consistent, this is direct. Do we have any questions on any of the ones we've done so far? After you have that written down, go on to the next page. We'll do a couple from there and then any others you guys want to see. Yes, we're going to do one on the next page. We are going to do 17. Okay? Great minds. 15, is that direct, inverse, or neither? Direct. It's a line, it goes to the origin, the constant is the same. 17, is that direct, inverse, or neither? Inverse. Because it makes that shape, it's that hyperbola shape. What about 18? Neither. Because it's not a line, it's not the hyperbola, so it's neither. Anything that is not one of these two is neither. Okay. Look at other problems on this page, on that last page. Are there any we want to see, go over, have questions about before we move on? 20. So kind of like your order pairs, your table, you have to think the same thing. You just have to know how to read this. So this is a mapping where the arrows show what x's and y's go together. So if this were direct, I would have to divide 2 and 3, 4 and 6, 8 and 12, and 12 and 18. These can also be simplified. So let's see, 4 and 6 would be 2/3. 8 and 12 would also be 2/3. 12 and 18. Divide both by 3. Oh, divide each by 6. I was like, there's something hard. Okay. So this would be direct because dividing gives us all the same answer. Okay. Others in that? If not, go on to the next page. So when we start our joint and combined, some of them will be just like what we've done before. It'll say directly or inversely, and we'll just write the equation. Sometimes the variables will change, so the format will be the same, but the variables will be different. Or they might say something else, so we'll cross that bridge here in a second. Change this one to say square root, because it copied itself. Right? So y varies directly with the square of x. Similar to y varies directly with x, just now has the square of x. So y varies, that's going to be y equals. We still need our k in there somewhere. It will always be right after the equals. How would we write with the square of x? Exponent. So x squared. Okay. So pay attention to the words because that'll tell you how to write these equations. Y varies directly with the square root of x. That's what that should say. Will be very similar to the first one, except now it'll have square root instead of square. So y equals k times the square root of x. Try not to confuse the square of x and the square root of x. For this next one, when we see the word jointly, be thinking directly. They're almost the same, except jointly means there's more than just the two variables. There'll be 3 or more. So just like with directly, the variables would go next to each other like we're multiplying. Here we're starting off with z varies, so that would be z equals. Still need your k, no matter what. And then jointly with x and y, you would just put those next to each other. X and then y. The k is your constant, so you need that in all of your equations, otherwise you don't really have a point for making your equations. Okay. Other questions so far? For this next one, it has the same thing we had before, z varies jointly with x and y. Now it also has and inversely with w. So inversely, before we were dividing our x, same thing. We're going to be dividing whatever that does. Yes. So z equals kxy, all divided by w. Yes. How do you think we would write z varies directly with x and inversely with the product of w and y? Do it. Okay, so pay attention to the words. Z varies, z equals. directly with x is going to be your k times x. And then inversely, we're dividing, and we're multiplying w and y together. So once you know how to set it up, then the problem becomes a little easier to solve. Okay. We're going to go through some of these examples, starting with number 1. Variable m varies directly with p. So it's a normal direct variation, but the variables have changed. Think about your m like your y, and your p like your x. Don't change the variables, but think about them like those. If that's the case, how would we set up this equation? So not with the numbers yet, just with the variables, how would we set up that equation? But with the variables they gave us, not the y and x. But instead of using y and x, use m and p?
Yes.
So reset that.
M equals K times P.
Yes. So now that we know what it looks like, then we can start solving other things. M is still like your y, p is still like your x. So to find your k, we would still do the same thing. Divide 75 and 10. And then after you find your k, put that back in your equation. So m equals 7.5 p. And that last part, we need to find m when p is 16. So we don't know m, but we know p is 16. Put that in for p. Multiply that, figure out what m is. So after we find k, these numbers no longer matter. The only one that still matters is the k. So what would your m be? 120. The check method still works here. So if I take 120 and I divide 16, we should get 7.5. Because that does, we know that's our final answer. So what's nice about these problems is that even though the variables might change, the process is still the same. So we're not really learning a whole new process. Questions on that first one? For the second one, r varies inversely with variable t. R would be like our y, t would be like our x. How would we write that equation? R equals k over t. Then we can use the information given to start solving for k. So we know r is like y, t is like x. And if we're looking for k, we need to still multiply them together. Do that. Tell me what you get. Then we would take that k value, put it back into our original equation. So r equals 4032 over t. Look at the other numbers they give you. So now we need to find r when t is 30. Put 30 in for t. And figure out what r is.
34.4.
And then again, your check method still works here. So if you were to multiply 134.4 and 30, you should get 4032. Do we have questions on either of those? We're just going to do a couple more and then stop for today. So on the next page, number 3, variable y varies jointly with p and q. Think about how we were just writing the jointly equation. How would we set this up? Look back at the examples we were just doing if you need a reference. Allison? Okay. So K, P, Q. Yes. So that would be your equation. When you have problems that are jointly, take the numbers that they give you, put them in. So we have y is 144. We don't know k yet. We know p is 12 and q is 8. From there, start to solve for k. So multiply 12 and 8 together. What is that? 96. I'm going to rewrite this. And then divide both sides by 96. What is our k value? After you have that k value, same as before, take it, put it into your original equation. So y equals 1.5 pq. Then look at the numbers we have and fill those in. So here we're looking for y. We know our k. P is 15. Q is 25. Multiply those all together, figure out what y is. What's our y value? 562.5. Okay. When you are checking for jointly problems, you'll have to put in the number you found, use the numbers that were given, and then solve for k and see if you get the same thing, which you should. Questions on that one? We're going to skip 4 for right now and go to 5. Variable t varies directly with the square of m. How would we write that equation?
What's the
Y is similar to t, yes. Elijah. Brian, what were you saying?
Reading the equation of it up and back for a square.
So what would it be for this one if we're using t instead of y?
T equals
So just make sure you're using whatever variables are given. Okay. Then they give us when t is 8, m is 2, put those in and solve for k. So 2 squared would give us 4. Then we could divide on both sides by 4. So 2 is k, yep. Put that back into your original. T equals 2m squared. And then it asks us to find t when m is 4. Put 4 in for m. Say that louder.
32.
Should be 32. 4 squared would give us 16. 2 times 16 is 32. Same as before, the check method, you would have to find your final answer and then put it back in with the numbers given and solve for k. There are more word problems that we're going to do next class, as well as practice some more, and then I'm also going to give you your review. Did you want to see 4 before we're done for today? Yes. Okay.
That's why.
All right. So for number 4, the volume V varies inversely as the pressure. So it gives us a variable for like our y, but not for our x. So you could call that x, call it p, whatever you want. Okay. If the volume of a gas is 200 cc's when the pressure is 1.6 liters per square centimeter. Before we start finding our k, we need our equation, especially if the variables are not y and x. So using the v that they have, we have v equals, it's inversely, so we're dividing k over x. Then because it's inversely, we can use, how do we find k to find our k? So 200 times 1.6. What would our k value be? Then we could take that k value, put it into our original. So v equals 320 over x. The last part says find the volume, so we're looking for v, or your y, to the nearest tenth, so we might get a decimal. When the pressure is 2.8 liters, so put in 2.8 and figure out what your volume is.
Does that say 20 or
2.8. rounding to the nearest 10, so 0.3. And then our label would be CC. Okay. So this word problem was just like one we've already done because it was just inversely. We'll do some where it has both or jointly next class.
So just make sure that you are keeping an eye out for if it's asking for direct or inverse. I see a lot of us getting those mixed up. So it doesn't hurt to highlight or underline, making sure that you are identifying those key pieces of information.
Circle it if you have to, whatever. Okay. So for the rest of the class, I know we don't have a whole lot of time. If you want to use it to practice more of this, direct, inverse, Khan Academy, use that time. Let us know if you have any questions.